All right, well, thank you for coming, everyone. I think we are ready to get started. We have a good crowd, and I'll hand this over to my colleague, Associate Dean of Admission and Financial Aid, Taryn Almanzar.
Thanks, Ross. Before we get, as Ross mentioned, I'm Taryn, I'm the Associate Dean for Admissions and Financial Aid. But before I get started, I want to acknowledge our other colleague, Dean John Haskins, who is here with us, and he's the Dean of Students. And he basically sees all of the students through the life cycle, from admissions to enrollment to career development. So hang on to his name. He's somebody that you want to definitely get to know once you get here.
It's great to see all your faces. I'll let the information begin. I just, as Taryn was saying, this is one of the things we just enjoy the most of our jobs, is seeing all your faces or some of your names if you don't have your cameras on. And it's just great to meet you all, at least virtually.
Yes, thank you, John. So welcome everybody, as Ross have stated. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever in the world you may be from. I just want to say that you are very reflective of what you will find at the J School, and you will hear from our panelists about that, where it's a very small school, but very global, very diverse in terms of citizenship, ethnicities, professional backgrounds, careers, so on and so forth. Before we get started, I just want to take 2 minutes to explain what this session is all about. I know you have registered for it. I know that you've read the description, but just so that you know exactly the format of it. We're not going to be talking about in details about the different programs, meaning we're not going to be talking and discussing what's the MS program, what is the MA. We're not going to be talking about the admissions requirement, the different educational financing options. That's not the purpose of this session. We're going to have a session to address the different programs tomorrow and educational financing at 1 p.m. My colleague Ross has put in the link for that registration. So if you have questions about that, if you want to know a bit more about the nuts and bolts of, again, the academic programs, educational financing, and academic requirements, that is the session to attend. Today, what we're hoping to do with this wonderful, wonderful panel is to give you a window view of what kinds of thought process, decisions, background currently enrolled students have, and how did they put together their admissions application, what made them apply to the J School, how did they know that this was the right fit, and how did they approach the financing aspect of it. And when I say financing, it's just taking into account, do I continue to work? How do I pay for school? Do I look for a job? So on and so forth. So it's going to be very organic, and it's more of like, I want to call it a coaching session more than anything else. So without further ado, I am going to turn into our wonderful panel. We have representation from the MA program, from the MS full-time program, and I'll turn it over. Who wants to start? I mean, I can call out your names, but I'll let you all decide. Who wants to start?
I'm happy to go first. Hi, everyone. My name is Tanika D'Souza. I'm in the MA Arts and Culture program. I was also very honored and lucky to have been nominated president of the SPJ. So that's sort of what I've been up to since I started at the J School in September.
Hey,
I can go
Candy.
next. Oh,
No worries. Do you want to go?
yeah, sure. I'll go next. Hey, everyone. My name is Jordan. I am also very honored to be here. I am originally from Houston, Texas, but I've been living in New York for the last 8 years or so. I did grad school here, and I am the president of our LGBTQ society, journalist society here at Columbia. We're called the Queries, kind of like queries, but queries.
Hi, I'm Candy. My pronouns are he and him. I'm originally from Los Angeles. I'm in the full-time Master's of Science program. And I am a board member for our AAJA like chapter, it is that stands for Asian Americans Journalists Association. So yeah, pleasure to meet you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Marcella. I'm in the Stabile program, the investigative journalism program. And I'm also the president of the National Association of Hispanic Journalists, the student chapter here at the J School.
Thank you all. As you can see, there's representation for everything here. So with that said, let's start off with the first question. What were you doing before coming to Columbia? And what led you to apply to the J School? Like, where were you in your career, in your life? And you said, you know what, this is the moment for me to start looking at graduate school. Okay, I'm just gonna start calling out names. Tandy, do you want to start? And I'm calling out you because you're the first one that I see on my.
Okay.
Mhm.
All right. So to get started, I've been out of school for like around 3-4 years. I graduated. It's almost 4 years. Yeah. So I went to school for journalism. I worked a lot in like freelance journalism. Wasn't necessarily something that was like very stable. So when 2020 came around, I finally got a full-time staff writing job. And then, as you all know, the pandemic happened. Then, newsrooms folded, and you're back where you started, right? So for me, I think a lot of it was to go back and learn more skills. I think in the past, I was I kind of had like a traditional print background, so I was thinking, hey, that was the only thing that I could do, right? So I was thinking like, hey, what program, could I get into to kind of catch me up on like stuff like audio and data, and that's why I'm here today. Yeah.
Thank you, Tandy. Marcella?
Yeah, so I graduated from college in 2020, so right at the beginning of the pandemic. And for that year, so I took 1 year off between like undergrad and coming to Columbia. And during that year, I was freelancing, both like journalism, but also doing like translation work. And honestly, anything I could do during that time. It was a really hard time to get jobs. I think it's better now, but so in undergrad, I didn't study journalism. I went to Smith College in Massachusetts, and we didn't have like a journalism program. I started freelancing during my junior year, but I didn't have like the training. And honestly, not the experience I wish I had to be able to apply for jobs. And so I was seeking more training, and I'm very interested in investigative journalism. So I knew that like coming here, I would actually like be able to learn those skills that I didn't have before. So that's what led me to apply and to come here.
Thank you, Marcella. Jordan?
Yeah, thank you, Taryn. I actually was working in corporate America. I have been out of undergrad for about 4 years now, almost 5 actually, and I was working at Adobe. And I came out to my family around my senior year of college and sort of became really obsessed with this idea of shame and other people's shame, and how it prevents us from being who we are. And so I started a podcast when I was working at Adobe, and it started growing. And I had a friend who graduated from the J School who recommended that I start looking into this as a craft instead of a hobby. And I never really thought of myself as a journalist, but I decided to apply, and it's been a really great decision. And I left my job at Adobe and am now kind of entering into this new world of journalism, but that's kind of my story.
Thank you, Jordan. Tanika?
Yeah, very similar to Jordan in that I was working in finance. So I spent the last 7 years in Australia, in Melbourne, and I was working in wealth management as an associate private banker. So it was sort of an untraditional route to get to the J School, but I had been doing a little bit of freelance work in arts and culture journalism. So I knew that I had an interest there. But once the pandemic hit and I was sort of staying at home and doing my job on Zoom and doing all of these meetings. And I just kind of had a lot of time to think. And I thought if I didn't pursue this now, would probably never happen. So I decided to take the opportunity, and here I am doing an arts and culture degree at the J School under the MA program.
Thank you all. So all of you are coming in with different levels of experience, backgrounds, and points in your life. How did you know which program was the right fit? What I'm hearing from all of you, yes, this is the right time for me to go to graduate school. This is the kind of skills that I need and to move forward. But when you looked at the different options, how did you choose? What came into your consideration? How do you make that choice?
So I think for me, choosing the MS program had to do with, like I said, learning new skills. So there's the general MS programs basically lets you learn everything from like data, like you can make a documentary, you could make a podcast. So there's a lot of versatility, I think, compared to kind of what I was used to, right? In like kind of just writing print journalism. So that was like a main selling point. I think there's just a lot of opportunities to learn new stuff, and it just in general, I think it was a no-brainer for me to take the MS program.
For me, I was interested in investigative journalism, so it was also very clear that Stabile was the best program for me. I think that I am still interested in long form journalism and projects that, takes a lot of like digging for you to find wrongdoing and hold institutions accountable. And so Stabile is just like literally the perfect program for me. So if you're interested in accountability reporting and you want to do lots of digging and data and investigations, Stabile is the program for you for sure.
Yeah, for me, I actually thought the Columbia admissions website did a pretty good job of outlining exactly what program would best fit my experiences and my interests. And for me, that was the MS program, just because I was not entering the J School as someone with more than 3 years of experience, or I think it's 2 years, which is the MA program. Taryn, feel free to correct me there. And I also had more of an interest in general human storytelling, as opposed to the more investigative side, which is where Stabile is. And so the MS program was kind of a natural fit for me.
And for me, the majority of the work I'd been doing as a freelance journalist had been in the arts and culture space. And I'd also minored in art history in my undergrad. So it just felt like the perfect fit to go into the arts and culture program under the MA banner, because it really targeted exactly what I wanted to do in terms of criticism, in terms of opinion writing. And so I was really grateful to have had that specialization offered to me.
Perfect. So you saw the program, you did a little bit of investigative work and said, okay, this is it. This is a program I want to apply. Let's talk about the application process, right? Just to put it out there, and so that we've repeated this a while, but we take a holistic approach, meaning at the J School, there's not a GPA requirement, there's not GREs that are required. So how did you put together your application? Let's start with the essays, right? How did you approach that? How did you craft the essays so that you were showing your interest in, first of all, the most important things to show is that you have a passion for reporting. And that's very broad, but then how did you approach the essays? What went into crafting those?
So in terms of the application as a whole, I can't wait to hear from everybody else. But when I say to people that I started my application 11 months in advance, I think I come across as a little bit psychotic, but I think that it was a really good thing to do, because especially with the essays, it allowed me to go back over and over and over again and make sure that I was getting the right tone across. Because I think when you're working, under pressure and you're trying to get this application out, you may not get the tone you want to send across. And I think with regards to the essays, the different essays have different requirements. I think for the autobiographical essay, the way that I approached it was I wanted to tell a story, the story of myself and the story that was leading me to the journalism school. But then some of the other more specific essays, especially for the MA program, I tried to be a little bit more succinct, a little bit more to the point, just to get across to the administration and to the admissions office that I was a good fit for the program.
So I think for me, I did not do it 11 months ahead of time, but I did, budget some time ahead of time to kind of get everything done. For me, the GRE did eat up a lot of time for me, so budget accordingly. Since you have some time right now, if Columbia's your dream school, I would focus a little bit more on essay writing and not the GRE, right? But for me, I think just as a writer, I think just seeing it as another opportunity to kind of showcase what you have, so if you have like a distinct writing style and an inventive writing style, I think it's a really good opportunity to kind of highlight it through your essays, especially your autobiography, I don't know how to pronounce it, but your autobiography, right? Because you're kind of being able to showcase yourself, and you're able to talk about yourself in a way that reflects your writing style. And so I kind of allowed myself to be a little bit more fun with it. I wasn't too indulgent in the humor, but I tried. I think Ross remembers that that's a little funny in it. And of course, the professional essay, a little bit more serious, but I'd still, try to put some of my personality in it.
Yeah, so for me, I had to also do like the Stabile essay. So if you're doing documentary or Stabile, you have to do this third essay. And so what I did was like the autobiographical one, about my life and the things that I feel like have shaped the person who I am, both like just personally, but also kind of like professionally a little bit, but like all about kind of me and a little bit of my family history, things that I feel like made sense to include. And then the main one, I basically try to explain how the things I did before coming here, like research I did in undergrad, like other experiences I had, how they kind of like, even though they weren't like journalism per se, they still like are skills that will help me to work as a journalist. So how like my previous experiences translate into wanting to go into this school and this program. And then the Stabile essay, I talked a lot about my passion for accountability. And what I did to prepare also was to watch a lot of previous of these like webinars, and like there are a lot of videos in the J School YouTube channel. That's my little tip. Like I spent hours watching those videos to understand like what is it that they are looking for, and is that something that I have, or that like my experience can be also, seen through the lens of what they want. And so I feel like that way I was able to, like, I took notes and I was like, okay, this is what they want, how like my experience fits into that. And so yeah, so that's the YouTube channel link is in the chat. Highly recommend.
Yeah, so my approach was honestly just being myself. I was a little bit worried, honestly, that, maybe it might not be a fit, since my style of journalism and my background was not as traditional as maybe the ideal J-School candidate, but really there is no ideal J-School candidate, as you can sort of see by all of the different backgrounds that we come from. And so my advice would be to really lean into your personal story, and don't be afraid to communicate that through your writing, and through your professional interest essay as well. Be honest about who you are, and ultimately, while the J School is, going to choose you, you also have to choose the J School as well and make sure it's a right fit. So I would say really be yourself, tell your story, and if it happens to be that it's a fit, then that'll be awesome. The other thing I would add is that one thing that really helped me as I was crafting the essays was just to read my essays out loud. I typically have a really long form sort of writing style. I like to write longer sentences, but I remember as I was reading it out loud, I was like, wow, this is kind of a little verbose, honestly. And the J School does the admissions team is really intentional about some of those word limits. So I would encourage all of you to read your essays out loud. And one of the classes that I'm actually taking right now, it's called Storytelling for the Year. The professor makes it a point for us to understand that writing is really kind of like music. So it should have rhythm, it should have punctuation, and you should kind of feel like you're, in a way, singing a song as you are telling your story. So I think that would be my best piece of advice. Read it out loud and make sure it conveys the same emotion.
Thank you. Thank you for those tips and advice. I would emphasize, all of the points were just right on target, but being yourself and letting us know who you are is key, as you've heard from all of them. And Jordan, you were right on the money to say that it goes both ways. You have to know the program, understand the school, and most importantly, understand where you are in your career and how the J School will be able to provide that for you. And that comes with an honest assessment. So thank you for that. Let's talk about another piece of the application that's a bit anxiety producing, and that is choosing your writing samples, your audio samples. How did you select? How did you pick the ones that you were going to include in the application?
So I think,
No, go ahead.
Oh, okay, I guess. All right, thanks. So for me, I ended up choosing my samples based on kind of, I think, mostly like feedback, I think, from the people who read it. I think if you have people who are honest with you, that read your work, I think you can get a pretty good gauge on what your best work is, and some of the work that you can kind of pass on. For me, I was a little lucky to have a few articles published, so I was able to send those in. Obviously, I prioritized the stuff that was published, to kind of show my full range of like being able to report a story, to write a story, to pick out pictures and stuff like that. But I think there's a lot of stuff, I think, that I was able to kind of see, not my own stuff, but like a lot of the other people who are in this program. A lot of their work wasn't published work, and I found it to be fantastic. And so I would recommend you just to get a good gauge on what kind of work other people enjoy, and also work that you're proud of yourself. I think that is just as important. I was able to pick out some articles that I really enjoyed writing, and I think the missions can see the kind of pride that you have in your own work by the way that you by the stuff that you pick out and share.
Yeah, I was gonna say, it sounds simple, but just like pick the best of what you have. Like whatever you think it's the best writing, the best work you have, that's what you want to show. And so yes, pick like published like clips if you have them. If you don't, then it could, I believe it can be like academic writing or other kinds of writing, but just pick the best. And I mean, according to whatever it is that you are proposing. So like in my case, like applying for Stabile, I try to like have a clip that it wasn't investigative because I hadn't done investigative work before, but it was something like along the lines of the interest I was showing in my other essays. And so, but don't worry too much about it because it's not everything. Like this is one part. So if you don't have the clips and what you have is not something you love, that's okay. I feel like out of the three, I had one that I was like, okay, this is good. And the other two, I was like, they're not great, but that's what I got. And I'm just gonna, hope that there's other parts of my application that will stand out. So just pick the best and just don't overthink it.
So similar to Tandy and Marcella, I also picked pieces that had been published, but I also tried to, and this is for the MA, for anybody who's interested in applying to the MA program, one of the things I tried to do was look through the pieces that I had published and try to pick pieces that I wanted to continue working on once I finished grad school. So I had a few items that had to do more with sort of lifestyle or more fashion, and those particular areas weren't necessarily what I wanted to focus on during grad school or even post grad school. So I tried to pick pieces that were very much to do with, say, arts criticism or opinion writing or more critical pieces or narrative pieces. And so almost to Jordan's point before, it was sort of my way of saying, this is the journalist I'd like to be. And hopefully if that matches up with what the school's looking for, we're going to be a good fit. We're going to be a good match. So I would say choose pieces that reflect you, reflect well on you as a writer, but also that reflect who you want to be once you're done with grad school.
Yeah, and I'll just echo everyone's sentiment. I picked pieces that I really, really enjoyed writing as well. One of mine was from my podcast. I submitted an audio sample, and the others were like I did an opinion piece for after the Supreme Court had ruled the gender in the workplace ruling last year. And then my last piece was actually a response to one of my favorite TV shows. It was like a sort of criticism of that. And honestly, for me, it was just things that I was so passionate about that I wanted to share with the admissions team. So I would say don't be afraid to submit things that you just really enjoy writing, even if it may not seem like the conventional piece to submit. I think really the most important thing that the admissions team is looking for is passion as well as your writing style. And that should come across no matter what you write.
Those are excellent tips. Thank you. Thank you. I'm like, were you part of the admissions committee meeting? Did you have a mole in there? Because you hit right on the target, all of the things that we pay attention to, which is writing style, cohesiveness, clarity of thought. And I will just echo and emphasize what all of them have said. Pick the ones that you're most proud about, the ones that reflect who you are. I always say, submit the writing samples that if this was a contest where you were going to win, I would say $1 million, but it's New York City. So I'm going to bump this up to $1 billion. And you said, you know what, I'm going to submit because when they see this writing samples, they're going to be blown away. So with that said, let's move on to another part of the application. Before we do that, let me clarify. We will not be talking about transcripts. That's pretty straightforward. We're not going to be talking about like the questions in the application because that's pretty straightforward. So in terms of the supporting docs for the app, let's talk about recommenders. And how did you pick who was going to write an amazing letter of recommendation for you? How did you pick that recommender? How did you approach that recommender? And how did you pivot from there?
Well, I would just go ahead. Mine is pretty straightforward. So I had just graduated from undergrad, and so all my recommenders were professors, and they were the professors I had good relationships with. I had taken their classes. Some of them I had worked with them outside of class. One of them I worked as a research assistant for like a couple of years, and so they knew me very well. And so I picked professors who could really speak to like my skills, my passion, and like the best part of me, kind of like the professors who like rooted for me the whole time I was in college, who like, yeah, who knew me well. And so I think I approached them in advance, like you got to give them time so they can actually like, write something well and not be rushing. So I just chose my three favorite professors that I had the best relationships with. And I knew, because of the relationship that I had built with them for years before, I knew that they would have good things to say, and they were happy to do it. So, yeah.
Yeah, similarly to Marcella, I think it's so important to give your recommenders enough time so that they're not, stressed for time when they're writing these recommendations. So what I did is I approached a number of different people just in case someone said no or someone didn't want to. And I don't know if this is a great thing to share, but someone did say no. So it was good to have a few people on my little list. So I had backups. But what I did for the three people who agreed to write my recommendations is I provided them with a little booklet of sorts, where I just gave them all the information they'd need to know about me, and just gentle reminders about the good things that I'd done under their, either, if they were my professor, or one of the people that I got to write a recommendation for me was a manager at the bank I worked at. And so I just put down little wins that I'd had, while I was working under them. And then I also highlighted some of the things that the school was looking for so that they wouldn't be caught off guard about what they need to write about me. And I thought that was quite helpful. So just a little booklet, just saying who you are, how they know you, just little reminders. And then also, deadlines are really important. So just letting them know that this is when the recommendations have to go in, little reminders along the way. And that should sort it out.
Yeah, I'll add to that. I think these are really great pieces of tactical advice. I think what I would add is that your application is really a story that you're telling from multiple different angles, and your personal essays are a chance for you to tell that story, but the recommendations are a really powerful opportunity for other people to tell the story that you're trying to tell. So when you look at your application from a really strategic perspective, you want to make sure that you're picking people who understand the story that you're trying to tell and who can add their own unique perspective to that story. So whether that is previous professors, whether that is previous employers or managers, I chose people who I could sort of align the overarching story of my application to, and who could speak to different experiences that really drove that story. And like Tonika and Marcella said, making sure that you give those recommenders plenty of time in order to help you craft that story, in order for them to craft that story. I would say also, for me, like getting on the phone with them and kind of making sure they understood exactly what my application was about. I sent them my essays. So maybe it's a good idea for you to get those essays done ahead of time and send them to them so they really understand what you're trying to convey in your application. That was really helpful for me.
Honestly, like I wish I had this advice when I was looking for my recommenders, but so I think my advice is, I know a lot of people, I think, are a little bit anxious about asking, these recommenders, these professors, these editors, these managers that you've all worked with for something. And I think given that you're applying for Columbia Journalism School, given like most likely your work, I wouldn't worry about it. I have a great feeling that like a lot of these people want to do it. I had that feeling. I was like really worried, like not that they would say no, but that I was bothering them. But a lot of them like wrote these, you know, I've had like they told me they wrote these glowing recommendations and that they were really happy to do it. So for me, I approached two of my editors that I worked extensively under. They wrote me. And for my third, I was debating between like an old professor that I hadn't worked with for like 4 or 5 years, or this, you know, retail manager that I worked with for like almost like 7 years. So I ultimately decided to settle with the retail manager. And even though he's, you know, never worked in journalism, even though he's never been in like a real like higher education academic background, he was able to kind of convey how I worked. And I think that is something really important, is that if you don't have somebody with a journalism background, but they know you for how you work, they know what you're passionate about, and they know you as a person, I think that could be just as valuable as, you know, like a big time editor, a big time journalist that has a very like cursory understanding of who you are. So yeah.
Those were excellent advice. We usually get the question, should I go for this big name journalist, or should we go for somebody that is well known in either politically or so on and so forth? But if you listen to what all of them have shared, it's that they picked recommenders who knew them, who knows you, who knows your work, who knows your potential, and who is able and willing to write glowingly about you. So as you're thinking about your recommenders, keep that in mind. And Tanika, I'm so glad that you brought up the point that someone, or maybe more than one, said no. And that happens. That happens sometimes because the person does not have the time to do it. And that is okay. So do not get discouraged if somebody, tells you no. Forge ahead, get somebody else to write it for you. So I'm really glad that was shared. Now we talked about the application materials, the process. So let's fast forward a little bit. You submitted your application. You were like, all right, good luck, get me in. How did you approach the financing part of it? Just in general, nothing, it doesn't have to go into a lot of details, but one of the things that we strive for, particularly before someone applies or even before they decide to enroll, is to have their finances in order. And when we say finances, it's to take into account how they're going to be paying for school, what are the trade-offs of enrolling, because sometimes that means, and especially if you're enrolling in the full-time program, you will not be able to work. So that means, 9, 10 months without bringing in an income. So if you or anyone is, not all willing to share what kind of considerations, how did you approach that part of it, that would be great.
So this was a huge consideration for me when I was applying. I'm an international student, and as Taryn said, I think even students who are American citizens sort of don't work during their time here when they're doing a full-time program, just because the program is so intense. And I have to say, I heard this throughout the time that I applied. And when I got here, everyone was like, oh, it's too crazy. You're not going to have the time to work. And at the back of my mind, I was like, oh, it can't be that crazy. I'm sure some people will work. It's crazy. You can't work. It's really, really busy. So as an international student, that was anyway off the table for me. And one of the things that I personally chose to do was just make sure that I was in a position. And for me personally, it meant applying a little bit later, because at the time that I came across the journalism school and I was gung-ho and ready to apply, I wasn't in a financial position to do so. So for me, it meant taking a little more time working full-time, working my full-time job and saving up so that when I got to New York, I would be in a better position to support myself. The school is also very generous in terms of scholarships. I don't want to quote the statistic, but I think a lot of people that apply for scholarships actually do get them. And so that's been obviously a huge help in trying to finance the program. There's also a ton of outside scholarships that people can apply to. And I don't know if this happens before or after you enroll, but the school sends out this huge comprehensive, almost like Excel spreadsheet that lets you know where to apply and other scholarships that you can apply to. So that was super helpful. And also just having, I mean, for me personally, I chose to have, some honest conversations with family members who would be willing to support me in any way. And all of those things combined allowed me to come here. But I really had to reconcile with the notion that I was not going to work. And after having spent 4 years working full time, I want to be very clear and say that not having that monthly income it can be difficult. So it's really important to set yourself up and know exactly how you're going to make it through, your 9-month or 10-month program here.
So for me, I echo all those sentiments. I was working as well and saved up some money, but I definitely think it's not even close to how much is enough to pay for Columbia. But yeah, scholarships, outside scholarships, and also they'll sneak you up with some like money while you're in the program. I was actually just talking to the Dean John Haskins earlier about like just they randomly like put me down for like a certain scholarship that like just dropped $2,500 in my pocket, like just in the middle of the semester. I got an email and they're like, here's $2,500 for your work at Columbia. And I was like, cool, thanks, I'll take it. But I think also just one of the things I did that really helped was really understanding also just the city and how to navigate it financially, because it's not just Columbia that you have to worry about, it's the cost of living in New York City. So if you are somebody who is international or live pretty far away from New York City, I would recommend like looking into student housing, not just because of the cost of student housing, but also just the amount of money you'll save from just transportation. Like I think the train costs like $275 back and forth, and that stuff really adds up after a while. So being able to walk like 3 minutes away from Pulitzer Hall to my classes is fantastic, and not having to pay like money to get there is great as well. And just in general, kind of having an understanding of like just food rent. If I most of us don't drive. Public transportation is great in New York City, but if you're going to have a car, you have to think about parking as well, right? So all that you should definitely account for while you're planning for Columbia. And I think if you do, it will save you a lot of money. It'll save you a lot of time. It'll save you a lot of stress. And I think you'll have a better time in New York City if you have an idea of how to navigate it financially. In terms of like basically being able to pay for this, I think it is just it is tough to work. I did like one freelance assignment during this semester, and I was behind like an entire week on reporting for classes. And it's just, I would say, I mean, if you really want to, there is a part-time program, and a lot of people are working jobs, whether it be retail or at like a news publication. If you feel like that would put a little less pressure on you and you're not like in a rush to graduate in 1 year, I would recommend checking that out. But if you are going to do the full-time MS program, at least that's all I could speak for, I would say even like one like 800-word freelance assignment that, I didn't have to do that much reporting for, even that, just pushed me back by an entire week in terms of my classes. So I would absolutely recommend you not work if you have the opportunity not to.
I think for me, also working out the price tag for Columbia was pretty difficult. I think you just have to give yourself a lot of time to really lay out exactly how much you have, where your different sources of revenue are going to be coming from, or where they are at the moment, and reconcile that with the price tag of tuition, along with the cost of living, like other folks have said. And if loans are the route that you want to go, I would suggest getting ahead of that now, learning about them, understanding the interest rates, understanding the repayment plans. That is probably, I would imagine, what most people are doing at Columbia. There is a generous situation with scholarships, but loans are a reality for most people who are going to be entering graduate school, like in a general sense. So I would just say to ensure like that, start early. I also am someone I've worked since I was 16. So I think getting to the full-time program and realizing like that's not an option, I think that's something you really have to set expectations with for yourself as well, like everyone here has already said. So yeah, just +1 to what everyone else has said.
So for me, I come from like a low income immigrant background. So I do not, like, my family is not able to support me financially in any way. So through undergrad, I had a full ride, so I didn't have to worry about it, which was a huge blessing. And when I applied for this program, I was like, I can only make it if they give me scholarships. And I applied to 2 other programs as well. And I was like, I'm going to go whatever they give me money, because that's just my reality. It's being honest with myself. And the reason I'm here is because they did give me money. I know it's like limited and like not everybody gets to have. So it's a complicated topic because I don't know how they pick people, but they fully funded me. And so so that's why I'm here, because Columbia is paying for me to be here. I'm very thankful. It's like a huge privilege that I don't even have the words to describe. I literally like made an appointment with Taryn after I got the letter. Do you remember this? And I was like,
Of course.
is this real? Like, is this number what I'm supposed to pay? Or is this like, are you really giving me this money? Because it's just unbelievable, but like it does happen. And so make sure that you apply to all the scholarships you qualify, because it's not like they just handed it to me. Like I had to do all these, applications for different scholarships. I also did a different scholarship within Columbia that wasn't for the J school. So if you pay attention to scholarships that are like for particular groups. So if you're an immigrant, if you're from a particular like ethnic group or whatever, there's a lot of those, and like, don't discount those. Like those are really important. And so, yeah, just apply to as many scholarships as you can. And it's possible, like it's possible.
Thank you. Thank you for the honesty of each and every single one of you, and for sharing your experience. And I'll just recap and put in my 2 cents to what was being said about the financing piece of it. The first one that I always say, it's that New York is expensive, as you've heard from all of them. Plan for your living expenses. I am very partial to a certain caramel frappuccino, where every day I'm like, Taryn, you've had a tough day at work. You deserve this caramel frappuccino. Go out there and get it. And I said, it's only once a day and only while I'm working. I started to do some calculations, and I'm like, okay, that's $5 a day. That's still not too bad, Taryn. You deserve that frappuccino. $25 a week, $100 a month, $1,200 a year in that frappuccino. So with that, what I'm trying to say, it's been very cognizant. New York's expensive, and your $5 here, $2 here start adding up. So as everyone has said, take into account the living expenses and try to mitigate that, because that's what you have control over. Tuition and fees, that's set by the university. Everything else, to a certain degree, you still have to eat, you still need food, you still need transportation. But to a certain degree, you have some control over that. The other thing that I want to emphasize as well, it's, yes, student loans are a reality. We do have scholarship funding that we are able to offer. But I want to just demystify a little bit about how that process works. And again, you can tune in tomorrow and we'll have some other sessions to talk about educational financing. But the first thing, as it was stated, you have to apply for scholarship aid. You must. And why is that? Every single penny that we give out at the J School, it's based on donations that are made to the journalism school. And each donor, each foundation, they have their own eligibility requirements. And it can range from citizenship to areas of interest to years of experience. And that's how we're able to select and award the funds. As Marcela stated, there's a couple of inter-school fellowships that are offered by the university and which we let you know about, and it has an application process for it. Sometimes students discount, or I should say applicants discount themselves and say, oh, I'm not going to get it, or this is a long process. Apply, apply, apply. If at any point during the academic year, doesn't happen often, but it does, we have funding that comes in, or the university tells us that there is this allocation that's made available, we need for you to have that application in place so that we can consider you. The other thing I want to, full transparency, student loans are a reality, as Jordan said. So please look at, as he said, I think that was a wonderful advice, look at the repayment calculators and just think of the worst case scenario. If you go actually to student loans with an s.gov, they have a couple of repayment calculators. And what I would say, think of the worst case scenario. Say, if I were to borrow this amount, what does that mean in terms of interest, in terms of the monthly amount that you will be paying, in terms of the aggregate amount? And what that does is that it'll do hopefully a couple of things. The first one, it will drive you to apply to everything and anything under the sun. Ross has shared that outside scholarship listing. And even if you decide to attend another school, just do yourself the favor of researching private scholarship. This is free money that foundations are giving to students. So just take the time to apply for them. The other thing I would say is to just think and have your plan in place before you sign that dotted line. And signing that dotted line means enrolling, because once you begin the program, as everyone has mentioned, it's intense. It's going to require your time and energy. We cannot make any guarantees, and as a matter of fact, we do not make any guarantees that we will be able to award any scholarship funding during the academic year. And there's nothing more heartbreaking than to have somebody come into the office and say, I don't have the funds to continue, and that person having to leave the program. So do your planning now before you sign that dotted line. So piggybacking on that, fast forward, you were admitted to the J School. And just so that all of you know, the relationship changes a little bit, because whereas before, the applicants were like, can I get in? Oh, is this, am I putting the application together? After we go through the admissions process and we're like, oh my God, these are the students that are the right fit, we're not the ones who are saying, please accept our offer. This is what we can offer you. Make the decision to come here. We really want you. The faculty want you. But how did you make the decision to enroll, to say, yes, this is it?
Okay, so I have a very, very short answer. I only applied to Columbia. It was the only school I applied to. And in my head, I told myself if I didn't get in, I'd apply the next year only to Columbia, and it would just keep going until I forced them to accept me. So when they did accept me, it was like a 5-second, I was like, where's the dotted line? Here's all my money. I'm gonna be a student now. So that was the way that I decided.
Yeah, I'll go next. I actually have to jump at two. I was super excited to be accepted into the program. It's been my dream school for many years now. And I was just really excited to be in the company of all of these amazing journalists that have talked today, as well as the professors that are world renowned. It has such an amazing brand. So it's a pretty easy decision for me.
Yeah, so I think I echo those sentiments as well. I think it's Columbia. I think a lot of us are kind of like a little enamored by like the name brand, but at the same time, I think I did apply to a couple other schools, and a lot of those professors and like admissions people helped me out a lot. So there's obviously like a little sentimental kind of feeling of being like, hey, I'm sorry. So for me, I think ultimately what sold me on it was kind of the professors, and not just like the big name professors, but also like not only just like the big name journalists, but like there are a lot of professors here that will really, that have like developed those big name professors. And I think the more that you kind of look into the work that CJS has kind of produced for students that not only like students who like produce work outside after graduating CJS, but like the work that they published at CJS and have like sold to newsrooms is pretty incredible. So I would really recommend you looking that up. I think that like after looking at that, I think that really kind of convinced me that I was making the right decision.
Yeah, I mean, same. I would say, like, for me, it was the financial aid first. So it was like, I'm going to go where I get the money, but then I got the money and then I could make a choice. And for me, I mean, I just knew it was going to be Columbia because I mean, the program that I wanted to attend was here. I mean, and so it's just an incredible school in so many levels. I'm like so thankful to be here. And from the once you get like acceptance letters and stuff, like Columbia is just like the way that everything is so much more, no shade, but like everything is so much more organized. And it's like you have like easy access to the administrators. You can just reach out. They make so many of these like sessions and you can ask your questions. Other schools are not really like that. And so I felt like instantly like welcomed. And I felt like they genuinely wanted me to come. And everything everybody else said, this is an amazing school. The best people are here. I mean, the best is relative, but you know what I mean. Yeah, I mean, this place is incredible. I don't know how people could say no.
Well, thank you. I think it's great, but I'm a little biased. So thank you for sharing your experience. Thank you for taking the time. Our wonderful panel. You are all of you from wherever it is that you're joining us and from whatever time zone it is that you're in. I think we're already at the end of our sessions. I could continue asking questions and questions of our panelists, but I know they have classes and reporting to do. So again, thank you. For the rest of you, we'll have some follow-up webinars. We'll have some follow-up conversations. Feel free to reach out to the admissions office. Like I say, asking questions saves a lot of guessing work. So just email us, call us, set up appointments. We're here to answer them. Enjoy the rest of your day or evening. Thank you.